Take a look at Chicago
And
as they are gearing up to hear the man who made history come to town again. Welcome back to our coverage here. Ed Gordon with a number of folks, including the mayor of Newark, New Jersey, Cory Booker, who I should tell you, though he will not admit it, is addicted to that Twitter. Mr. Mayor, give me a sense. You have to be happy because you've been out there pushing for this man, being one of the stalwart surrogates for a mighty long time.
Yeah, if I wouldn't embarrass myself right now, I might be dancing. I am so excited. It means so much for the United States of America. It means so much for my state and for my city. I'm thrilled about being able to move forward, and I hope it sends a message. Because what I worry about is these ideological extremes in our country. The Republican Party now has to do a gut check. Do they want the party of a Lugar and Olympia Snowe? Or do they really want a party that is the Tea Party is starting to try to pull the Republican Party, frankly, further to the right than even Reagan and others that are often exalted. So I'm hoping that this pulls it back to the pragmatic center of our country, and we can now move forward and get beyond the kind of nonsense we've seen.
So, Professor, let me turn to you. The mayor brought up the name of Olympia Snowe from Maine, who decided to, in fact, leave because her suggestion was that there were no more moderates. There was no more want to be anything but political. Is this president going to be naive to assume that he will have an easier road than he had in terms of trying to work bipartisan nature with the House and the Senate from this point on? At this point, term two, it's not though a victory, not a mandate by any means, and he will be a lame duck at that point.
He'll be a lame duck, but he also has to deal with an intransigent Congress. So the House looks like it's going to go to the GOP, although not officially just yet. And the Democrats had to pick up at least 6 of 14 close Senate races. They've already picked up 7, might pick up some more. So he'll have a Senate that's on his side. The question is the House of Representatives. And will he be able to convince enough Republicans to agree with him on, say, the fiscal cliff or other issues in the next 4 years? I think what we're going to see now, though, is an open civil war within the Republican Party.
All right, let's turn our attention to Chicago and Farhad Chideya, who is there at the Obama headquarters. And we should note that the president, I was teasing Mayor Booker, but the president has sent out a tweet, Farhad, that says, "This happened because of you, thank you."
Yes. Well, I happened to cross paths with the presidential motorcade this morning as we were going to a polling place to interview voters. He was getting cheered by people as he was leaving one of the pancake houses in Chicago in his home neighborhood of Hyde Park. So he's been here all day, pressing the flesh, taking meetings, and preparing for his big speech, which we haven't heard yet. Of course, the energy in the room is incredible, and the energy on Twitter is also incredible. We're asking people on the BET Vote hashtag, what's your #1 issue? And we're hearing some very interesting things you don't always hear, like cybersecurity. So not everyone is on the same page about what their top issue is, but most of the people who are tracking BET Vote are very happy that the president has a second term.
Lenny McAllister, let me turn to you and talk about the idea that as one who is a Republican strategist, what has to be your strategy now, while not a resounding defeat by any means for Mitt Romney, a defeat nonetheless, and one has to assume that the Republican Party, as has been said, has to look in the mirror and see what they have to do to change course.
Well, there's 2 things we have to look at. Number one, we have to look at the long term. What does the Republican Party need to do to engage all of America to win key elections all across the field? That's the first thing. But on the short term, there are lessons to be learned not only within the Republican Party, but within Black America as well. Within the Republican Party, we are looking at an example of political overreach. When the attacks on this president was about the economy and was not personal, you saw that the Republican candidate and President Obama polled very close, and in fact, that Republican candidate had a slight lead. But when 2 things happened, the voter enthusiasm went from kind of in a malaise to jumping up all of a sudden. Number one was voter suppression. When that became an issue around the spring, people got involved. And the other thing was when this election started becoming very nasty in tone, it went from being about politics to being personal. And once you had voter suppression, which is extremely personal when people take away your right to vote, and then you have the personal tone of this election, you started seeing the enthusiasm gap that Democrats had in the spring start to close, and then all of a sudden, Democrats and minorities started making sure they got to the polls, and you see the numbers that you saw in Pennsylvania, Ohio, Florida.
I think that tomorrow the real work begins. The reality is African-American unemployment is still in the double digits. The reality is there's a gross number of our young people who don't have access to higher education. So as President Jealous just intonated moments ago, we've got to be clear to push our agenda, not just go shopping for inauguration gowns, but figure out what are we going to do for the next 4 years to put the pedal to the metal.
Well, we want to get into that deeply with this panel. Give me just a moment. We want to turn our attention to Durante Terraldino, who is at the Romney camp in Boston, and give me a sense of what has to be. I suspect even if they thought they were going to lose, I'm certain they didn't believe it would happen before midnight. So they have to be very disappointed at this point.
Well, that's just it, Ed. Many people thought and were confident that they would actually win, and when the realization finally set in that Governor Romney had no path to the White House, it was like the collective hearts in the room skipped a beat, especially given the confidence of the governor. As I said earlier, he has not prepared a concession speech. One thing that they point to as a victory of this campaign is that it has widened the scope of the we had one young man at the polls earlier today who said he was probably Hispanic, gay, but also Republican. So this gives you a sense that though the Republicans didn't win this, they are certainly not out of the game.
Let us turn our attention now to Washington, D.C., and journalist Sophia Nelson, who joins us. She is with the Grill, and a familiar face to those of us who, in fact, watch the political punditry of the day. Sophia, it's so good to have you with us. Give me a sense of what you think about what we have seen. While many of us thought at the beginning of the day this may be an election that would take us into the wee hours, what does this say that this president was able to win relatively quickly based on the assumption of the day?
Ed, there's so much I've been wanting to weigh in on as you guys have been talking throughout the night, but I think that the real discussion here is the one you were having earlier, and I agree with Pastor Jamal Bryant in this regard. The Republican Party, I think, has to have a real conversation about who it's going to be and where it's going to go. I think this election really probably was never really going to be that close either way, because the Republican Party has become a shrinking party. And in essence, what has happened to it is it doesn't have a coalition. It has nowhere to go but white voters. And you saw tonight that 28% of the electorate, at least on what we know, was minority, which is a pretty high number. And Latinos will probably turn Florida for the president or save that state for him. Not that he needs it now if he's won Ohio. But the point is that if you begin to look at these states like Virginia, my home state, and you take a look at the demographics, you'll see that people of color really played a big role in this election. And the Republican Party just didn't have coalitions. They lost women voters probably, people of color. They had white male voters and those Reagan Democrats, if you will. That's pretty much all they had. And so I think what you're looking at is a Republican Party that has to have a real gut check now. It can no longer do this anymore. It's not good for the democracy. It's not good for the Republican Party. It's not good for people of color to not have an option in Republicans. They can only vote Democrats. That's not good. So I think the Republican Party is going to have to, I agree with Cornell Belcher. I love Tara, but I don't agree with her. I think they're in denial about how bad this problem really is for them.
Sophia, don't we also have to have a certain expectation? I'm going to go from you to a number of people with this question. Don't we also have to say the same to the Democratic Party, to say that African Americans have been loyal stalwarts for a long time and have been oftentimes taken for granted, and in fact to this president and to this administration to say quid pro quo is the name of the game in politics, now you owe me something?
Ed, I wrote a piece today that I'd encourage your viewers to look at on the Daily Beast, and I talked about why I was supporting President Obama. I had been undecided because I'm a lifelong Republican, as you all know. And it has been hard for me to watch the GOP become what it's become over the last 20-plus years. President Obama was the first Democrat I ever voted for, and I voted for him again today. But I think that the real issue here is, what are the Democrats going to do now with the loyalty that African Americans have shown them? Black unemployment went up. Black female unemployment went from 10.9 to 12.5%. Black male unemployment went down 0.1%, but if you look at certain age groups, it's up over 25%. Black people, as we said earlier, gay people have an agenda, Latinos have an agenda, veterans have an agenda as they should, Jewish Americans have an agenda with Israel as they should. Why can't we have one? And it's time that we do, and it's time that we get vocal about that.
Cory Booker, let me ask you, as one who is a mayor of a city that has a large